All right. For many of you have already met Praful. He has been a frequent participant in our supply chain forum of Southwest Florida. In fact, he has been a speaker in the forum also. And so we value that continued association. Praful currently resides in Austin, Texas. So he is not as frequently here as before. Well, he used to reside in Chicago anyway. And I have known Praful for, I don't even want to say how long, but more than 30 years. And I have always found that I learn from him every time I talk to him. And so given that obvious statement that, we can always learn from him, I'm going to turn it over to Praful to start his talk and conversation with us.
Well, thank you, Rajesh. I was thinking about it's about 33 years that we first met. And I've followed, actually, I think I've been to every one of their homes since '88. So I don't know how, but it's a great time to be a guest at the Srivastavs. They are a tremendous host. So hi, Pete. I'm seeing a lot of folks that I've met before. Just a quick introduction. As Rajesh said, I'm Praful Karanth. I relocated in November last year from Chicago to Austin, Texas, like I think a horde of others that have since made announcements that they're moving to Austin. I actually sold my home at Miramar Lake, so there's less thing for me to be visiting. Otherwise, I used to be in Fort Myers about once, twice a year for the last 16, 17 years. So my current role I started off in the industry. I ran supply chains at Office Max, did a lot of consulting with Booz and Alvarez and Marcel, primarily in retail companies and some consumer products. And as you know, in consulting, you can work with whoever your client is. So I worked with utility companies. I worked with automotive companies, but currently I joined SAP in 2016. It was very strange for me to enter SAP because I've never been a technologist. I've always felt you have to measure what you're working on, whether it's on the shop floor or do it with a stone tablet. You don't wait for a fancy Excel spreadsheet. But now I'm promoting dashboards and things that SAP is involved with. But I focus primarily on retail companies. And then because of my background of over 30 years in supply chain, I work in some of our consumer products, very little on our life sciences. So I know, Pete, you're using one of our products, so thank you very much for that. So I'll switch. And again, as I get into a presentation, I won't see your faces, so apologize. Oops, sorry. So I will. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let me just sorry. Okay. So when Rajesh talked about what my topic would be or what I'd be talking about, I know we all use the word digital supply chain. It's commonly used. And I said, how do I make it catchy? And I think it's more of what you interpret digital supply chain, what I interpret digital supply chain. I've taken on a little bit of my personal view, and I've tried to tack on where SAP plays in their role, and hopefully we are aligned. So that's good. And I'd be definitely interested in getting your feedback. It's more of an open session. So when I think of digital supply chain, I think of some of the trends that we are seeing. Let me just use this. Is this better?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay.
We can see this.
So the first thing, when you're in digital, and I work in retail, and I don't, as I was thinking about it, there are some unique things in retail, but hopefully what you'll find is happening in your supply chain. So the first thing that we see in supply chain is everything about sustainability. And sustainability is is in the marketing departments, in the finance organization, but the biggest contribution to reduction, whether it's emissions or waste, comes from manufacturing, supply chain, sourcing, procurement. So sustainability is a big driver in the trends in supply chain. The circular economy, which, as I said, I work a lot in retail, so the fashion and apparel industry. This is a huge deal, is how do you take raw materials that instead of tossing it, how do you put it back into a marketplace and have it reused, in the marketplace by somebody else? How do we reuse, recycle, refurbish, and put it into a saleable condition? When you look at the workforce is becoming, with the digital tools that they have, is how do they become very knowledgeable workforce? It's not just about the piece of work they do, but overall, how does this impact the value chain? Supply chain as with an outsourced service. When I read this from IDC, I thought of, it's interesting when you look at the 3PL model has always been a supply chain as a service. But as I work with some of our customers, they are turning out as they're becoming the excellence. In one example, a retailer started doing home delivery, and they've now taken that supply chain service that they've been offering their customers to other customers to offer the same kind of service. So companies are finding different subscription models, different revenue models. And so that is a trend that I've seen. Again, in retail, especially in fashion, but it's true in healthcare, life sciences, medical devices. The life cycle seems to get shorter and shorter. And that plays into what I view as the future of the digitized supply chain. We talk about flexible logistics. Again, this just means that it could mean a host of things. Could be, when you're delivering from a store or from your distribution center to a customer, you might have to change allocations and ship products to a different destination point. If you've got products coming over the ocean and you find the congestion in Long Beach, you've got in real time allow diversification or diverting product to another port, and the technology has made that possible. But this is where I think a lot of opportunity lies, where the more and more flexible you get, the easier it is, so that you can postpone your replenishment, your fulfillment to last minute changes in demand. Part of that is having complete visibility and transparency, and this is end to end. And I'll tell you what that end to end is shortly. But having that visibility and transparency, having material traceability. I know we worked with a tuna manufacturer, a producer, Bumblebee, and they put in traceability back to the fishermen in Indonesia that picked that fish, however, 2 months back or 3 months back. It takes it all the way through processing, through transportation, through distribution, to the shelves, to the consumer's home. So blockchains allowed or facilitated some of that traceability. In some industries, it's more critical than others. Obviously, the ability for tracking with sensors, and this could be tracking whether it's cold chain or not. It could be products coming inbound, could be outbound, could be while they're in the distribution center. Could be, some distribution centers, some of you may have warehouses that have 3, 4, 5 mile yards with containers. And so the ability to see where that product is, in which container, so to, again, facilitate the speed and efficiency, is putting sensors into those containers. And then, automation, robots and drones in terms of delivery, in terms of goods movement, in terms of, we've done this with a retailer in Canada, where we put in robots to do buy online, pick up in store pick. So taking the store associate off picking orders and having them engage with the consumer and allowing robots, and then using drones, obviously not during store hours, but using drones to do egress checks to see if any products are going to fall off, checking for gaps in the shelves. So, those are some of the trends that are coming out in digital supply chain. I'd be curious, I'll pause for a second, and again, like I said, I'm trying not to put any video so that it doesn't cover up some of your screen. Any thoughts, any questions, anything you would add? We good?
Mhm.
Okay. So before I get into digital supply chain, why has that become a priority? And again, this is not something that's, you're not going to learn anything new, hopefully, from this, but hopefully reinforces what you're seeing in your digital supply chain. The reason it's become is what in retail, what we started calling it customer adaptive. And as I was thinking about it, I always talk about retail, but this applies, I'd be curious, Pete, is, Arthrex and Hertz and anybody that's dealing, not just with a company, but also with the consumer. When I was at Office Max, our customer was IBM, Hertz, Citibank, because we supplied office supplies to them. We were on the B2B side. But very quickly it became apparent that the influences of that decision of what products we should be putting on a catalog, putting on a website, needs to come from the person who consumes the office supplies. That could be any one of you sitting in your office consuming that product because you influence the purchase decision. So I would argue that any industry, there is an end consumer, and that is why digital supply chain has become a key priority. For one reason, and this is when you look at a study that McKinsey did last year. Again, this was retail focused, but I think it does not change what's happening in other industries. I know the adjacent ones that I work with, consumer products, this is true, is supply bases have been disrupted. Countries shut down. Some countries took longer to open. Supplier bases were shifted. And so with all these supply-based changes, you had to re-establish connection with suppliers. In some cases, you had to get new suppliers. So how quickly can we onboard them so they can start doing business with us? Obviously, you want to mitigate risk, so you don't want to get any old supplier, creditworthiness, etc., which takes time, which then potentially impact product availability for your customer. Shopping behaviors have changed. We know, people, at least in retail, the amount of digital traffic has increased 400, 500, 600%. I just came off a call by the National Retail Federation where they said Albertsons and other companies have seen an increase of between 1,000 to 2,000%. So people are becoming more comfortable buying online, picking up from store or having it home delivered. And then the other thing is the whole brand loyalty. I'd be curious in your industry, I've always been your customer, but all of a sudden I see a certain value, a certain service that I want that you can deliver, and it's allowed the consumer, and in this case, your customer, to change brands unless you've got that such a unique value prop that creates that stickiness. But otherwise, the loyalty itself has changed. When you look at the vision and you just take consumer out and put customer, they're looking for a really good experience of how they buy. They're buying it from your sales rep, or they're buying it online, or they've got a standard purchase order. What does that experience look like? How easy is it? How quickly can I get it? Speed is of the essence. I want it convenient. I want to dictate, and that's a little bit of the control and options. If somebody wants to buy from Arthrex, and apologize, Pete, I'm using it as an example, but wants the product, I want it on my terms. I want it, delivery on Wednesday. And again, how do you build intelligence behind your supply chain to even agree to the customer that Wednesday is possible? They're looking for sustainability, whether it's in the packaging or in the material, or how many carbon emissions have you saved because you've optimized your transportation. That information is important to me because I'm going to call it a sustainability aware customer that puts a lot of emphasis beyond just price and availability. This comes from the retail side, which is all about trust and how you or your company's brand is entrusted with the consumer or your customer. Is I as a customer want to have complete transparency, not just of my products that I'm being delivered, but also visible transparency and where that product was made, by whom, was there any kind of, was it responsibly sourced? I want to maintain control, and at the end of the day, I also want value for what I'm paying. If I'm paying for something that I'm expediting, I'm willing to pay it because it's more convenient to me. And then obviously we talked about control and customers wanting that control, not you dictating when you can deliver a product. And then in some industries, and retail is one of them, even knowing the likes and dislikes of what they are talking about your brand. And I would even argue that companies like Hertz and others, what is your brand being described by in social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, and incorporating that into your supply chain planning, into your allocation, into your delivery. And in some industries, that customers or consumer product companies, the P&Gs and the Unilevers of the world, is what's not good enough for them is to know what Walmart wants or what HEB or Publix needs. But it's also who is the consumer or final consumer of that product, that I want to know what they're talking about. If I was Procter & Gamble and I want to know about Gillette, what are they talking about Gillette in the brand that I want to know about? So the focus is two things. One is I want to get closer to the consumer. I want to use analytics and insights to get very close to the consumer, which we call intimacy. And then you want to serve them on their terms, what they want, when they want it, how they want it. You've got to be able to deliver. Otherwise, if you come back to the fickle brand loyalty, you've lost them for life. So COVID demands, and then finally, what it has shown, and part of this is COVID-19, and even before that, I would argue is your whole trading partner base, whether it's your suppliers, your co-manufacturers, or your 3PL transportation providers, or if you outsource your warehouses, the supplier and the customer community needs to be linked in through a network. And expanding the ecosystem of those partners, not just in pricing, but purchase orders and contracts and payments and dynamic allowing dynamic discounting, the ability for any shifts in demand or that you are seeing, you can relay that back to the supplier as soon as possible so they can make adjustments. And vice versa, as the suppliers are beginning shutdowns, temporary shutdowns of plants or shutting down for Chinese New Year, how does that information relate back to you? So from a planning perspective, you are able to incorporate that and either order ahead of that shutdown, or knowing that we'll need to order more, or what the impact will be on transportation down the road. So complete visibility, complete collaboration, and complete transparency, all the way from forecast to plan to purchase orders. And then what that helps to do is having almost seamless silos. So you don't know who's the customer, who's from your organization, who's from your supplier, and they are linked, they are connected through an internal network. So those were the three things that I could think of from a digital supply chain. Why is it so critical now? Why are there articles out there that talk about why the supply chain needs to be in the boardroom, not just like IT? So these were some of the things that I thought of that really have driven the digital supply chain to be customer adaptive. And just a quick thing on where we see as customer adaptive, and you can put your company in this, is when you order from you have to know your consumer or customer anywhere they are. whether they are buying it from you from your website, whether they're hearing it from a trade organization or from a sales interaction with your sales executives. So knowing what that customer, how they order, what their preference is, what their price versus value, this thing is, what they've talked about you, or what the company's talked about you in social media. So knowing that customer and having that consumer intimacy, having visibility of inventory anywhere versus also the customer having inventory. So operating really like a retail store, when, what do you have on stock? What do you have that will be available, so that you can put and make it available to promise for that customer. So ability to see inventory anywhere is important. Again, this is a seamless shopping, but this remove the word shopping and call it ordering. So seamless ordering experience, and then the ability to fulfill and deliver anywhere. So whether in retail, it's in the store, at home, it could be. If I was, I know we work a lot with Home Depot, so I'll give that example. Is they've got people like DIY customers, and then they have pro customers, the contractors. And contractors saying, I don't want to come to your store to pick up. I want you to deliver to my job site. And you might have the same thing is if you're dealing with a hospital, and the hospital is going to create, building a new hospital or a wing, and I want to get your devices to that. How do I ask you to deliver there in the time frame that I want? And so having that requires what I see is having an ERP that allows you to know your customer. Everything sits on single view of customer, single view of inventory, and single view of pricing. And the supplier is the same, so you don't have two suppliers that are spelled wrong that show up on two different. So it helps your sourcing. And then from a pick, pack, ship, and deliver perspective, it's all about the digital supply chain. So I wanted to put that context of what is customer adaptive, and it's really applicable beyond retail. So before I start, any questions? Are we keeping everything at the end? Yeah.
We'll keep it to the end.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So what are the characteristics of a truly digital supply chain? So one, this is our view, is it's got to be intelligent. So the intelligence part is being able to pick up trends, patterns. A good example is, and I'll mention Home Depot, I work a lot with them, is from a planning and merchandising perspective, they were able to factor in the when it came closer to was the hurricane that happened in Puerto Rico, that drove their planning functions to be able to pre-ship a lot of building materials into the island before the tornado or the hurricane hit this thing. So think of, as if you are if you're seeing growth in a certain market, and I'll use Hertz as an example, is as we see more and more flights coming into a city, my demand for cars are going to go up. So driving that in your allocation of cars in certain areas, or what types of car do people, urban versus suburban consumers like, and changing the allocation that's in there. That some of that should come from your technology that drives and creates and uses intelligence from not just your history, but also the DMV or the Weather Channel, or in retail, and some of this may apply to your industry, social media. So what are social sentiments that's driving the planning? And then on the, obviously the execution part, it could be real-time weather, real-time traffic, could be temperature monitoring. Intelligent and predictive. Predictive would be this example I mentioned you about Home Depot and the hurricane, is how can you predict in your business process around planning and execution. We already talked about connected. That is extremely critical to how is it connected within the network with internal as well as external, key external trading partners, maybe not all of them, but your key suppliers. And then this thing about sustainable. Again, I think on a session I was on recently, we had EY, we had CNBC, we had the CEO of Albertsons and IKEA, and the third one was Sephora. They all talked about companies taking a stand in their, well, they talked about supply chain, but they talked about the company as a whole on not just sustainability, but it could be racism, you know, equality, gender equality, race equality. So it just means your supply chain's got to be able to do zero waste, zero emissions, zero inequality. So those are the three characteristics of the digital supply chain. I'll quickly run through this, but this to me is the one picture of what I call a true consumer-centric digital supply chain. It's got to be intelligent, predictive, connectable, connected, and sustainable. And everything starts from the customer, right? So it starts and ends. So your customer or your customer's end consumer, in the case of Procter & Gamble, it could be me and you, not, you know, the Walmart and Kroger's of the world. So when a customer order, the ability to capture a customer's order and to be able to apply historical information and machine learning and what are the social trends, what are people talking about the product, what's the latest in technology, factoring in some of that, you know, spike in demand with new products that you've had in the past, the ability to take that historical demand, add the insights from your own internally within your organization to then, and this is when I say intelligent predictive, some of this is manual, but a lot of these are automated, and the ability to take social sentiments, survey sentiments, weather insights, and build it into your planning to where your system forecast is as close to as possible. And the ability to do that with supplier insights and your own supply chain to come up with a balanced constrained demand. And you know, the usual, this process has not changed in at least 30 years that I've been involved with. What I have seen changes is the level of automation and the intelligence in getting some of this information into your plan, into your forecast the first time, and improving forecast accuracy has changed. Very quickly, this is supplier collaboration. This is where suppliers are getting real-time forecast, real-time plan, no emails, they know exactly what you're planning on. If they feel that there's going to be a planned shutdown which may not meet the demand, or you have manufacturing insights, then as a company to have that kind of insight to plan your demand, like I talked about shutdowns and things, to do that very quickly can impact product availability. And then having this visibility of product, not through ASNs, but almost like, I mean, ASN is a way of getting the product, but also knowing, sitting in Fort Myers and having visibility to everything coming over the ocean. And I know John is not on the call, but I know we've talked about this with P44 and Uber Freight and you know, getting every kind of visibility you can down to the container level. I'm going to come down here. And then and then coming into your distribution, what we call delivery is automated put away, automated pick pack, ability to put intelligence into your yard management, having visibility, whether it's your store or your customer, and having that visibility, putting intelligence around the real-time changes in routes based on traffic. And then again, in retail, it's all about delivery to the home. So it starts with an interest or a buy or what they're talking about through social media. It ends with how quickly you can deliver the product based on their convenience. So, and then in the middle sits this whole process that's not visible to the customer, is intelligent sourcing to where if you are making product, and I'll use the example that I've worked with another tire company or retailer, is if I'm making tires and I want to plan my forecast based on the plan, and I don't want to just create a sourcing event for a tire. I want to be able to negotiate tires based on where the commodity price of rubber is predicted to be. So I can use rubber prices, projections into and influence when I should be sourcing so I can get the best negotiated price. Automating contract management, obviously, the supplier onboarding, one of the most understated areas that as I talk to customers is they can spend anywhere from 6 to 9 months to bring on a new supplier because they got to do the creditworthy check, the ability for documentation, product quality, etc. And how can I cut that down to days and weeks so I can do business with them? And then obviously not just the sourcing and the contract, but also the procure pay and the invoice. So to me is if everything of this is at best done automatically with more exception-based management, with real-time visibility to data that allows me and alerts me where there may be a potential delay at a port, or it could be there's a spike, or somebody has just talked about your brand in positive or negative light that's going to impact the ability for incorporating that into insights, or what is the latest policy in custom trade that's going to impact you from a duty perspective that you can change source and origins. That is how, in my mind, where a supply chain needs to be. And so this is more of how we work with some customers is all the way from design, plan, source, make, deliver. Obviously, asset management in some industry, that's important. And then I can't stress enough is the ability to have a network of your suppliers so that they've been pre-qualified. And so as soon as you enter the network, you're dealing with a very healthy, very connected supply chain. And then this is the supply chain in SAP. Obviously, the Reba network is probably the biggest network in the world with about $4 trillion commerce. You got a manufacturing network, you have a logistics business network, of which P44, John's company, is part of that. And then having an asset intelligence network to make sure you're doing predictive maintenance and other sorts of uptime type of work with. And then lastly, sustainable. I'm sure a lot of you are working with this, is having that end-to-end transparency on what the carbon emission is, what is the sustainability from a material, and then we've got a Climate 21, which is working with the UN Sustainable and Initiative, SDG, and it's the Global World Economic Forum, creating a dashboard around where you can, just for internally and even for external sharing, is what has been your carbon emissions coming from your factories, from your distribution, from your transportation, from your sourcing. So again, the point of sustainability has got to be visible from not just the executive level, but down to your operation. And I would even argue in some industries, a lot of industries, it's about your customer knowing what you're doing about it. So I think that's what I had. I'm maybe a minute over. I'll open up. I can stop sharing, or at least what I can do is I can open up the screen. First of all, you still have the same positive thought you had before coming in, or I'll open it up.
So any questions for Praful?
And if I don't need to change the slide, you want me to stop the screen, or do you want me to keep the screen up?
You can stop the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had a quick question. Praful, this is Tom Foster from Gartner. I lead the life science, healthcare, and process industry industries in terms of servicing clients around those topics in supply chain. Just one question: when you think about, let's say, digital roadmap, right? It's a big topic for a lot of our clients, and when you think about the digital roadmap, have you, maybe from your perspective, have you dug into and built, not only the as is of where you think you are across the end-to-end supply chain, but then also thought about where you're at and which ones do you want to promote in terms of improving maturity? Just be interested to see if you had to do that exercise or is it more of an as is, this is where we're at, thinking about what we're doing next?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Tom, and thank you. I think for Gartner's support is, I know from a company perspective, we value where our customers value what Gartner calls all these solutions. But we're always doing roadmap conversations, and I think in my view, we don't try to be prescriptive. And the reason we don't want to be prescriptive is you don't know what you don't know what the customer is. The point is, we try to establish, so in retail, we establish nirvana. What does nirvana look like? And I don't think I've talked to a single retailer that's disagreed with it, because everyone's talking about it, right? How do we get closer to our customer? There's an experience gap and stuff. But it's where if it's a focused supply chain conversation, it's either in planning or it's in execution.
Yeah.
The only part that I would be prescriptive is how is your reporting? How is your end-to-end reporting on your supply chain? Because if it's crap, let's see what's crap look like, right? And this is where ERP is important. If you have a bad data model, this to be garbage in, garbage out. So if I get my data all clean or know what my data is, and I can put on a dashboard that says, sustainability is priority for me. Where am I in emissions and waste? If it's around delivery performance, where am I in delivery performance? And then you can so to me, a dashboard to know where I stand, assuming the data exists, or on planning, because I always say prior planning prevents piss poor performance, right? That's what Colin Powell said. And I believe that planning is the source of all, poor planning is the source of all evil. So there's different parts of, I would say, planning. I would talk about visibility. I would talk about reporting. But that's why the customers that I've had are very successful. I've seen very successful results. And I had a couple of CIOs tell me this is, Praful, how do you begin on any transformation journey if your foundation is not clean? If your data is not accurate across, and I'm talking retail, multiple channels, how is it, is me, my supplier, my customer, do we have access to the same data? Do I know what transactions I've done? If I can get that cleaned up, clearly supply chain is number one, sourcing is probably another. And then you've talked about customer experience, the website and commerce, the trust, the integrity with the customer data. Those become critical. But so I don't know if I answered the question, but the roadmap conversation begins with where do you want to be, and what's the as is part is more what are you think you're good at, and where do you think you're suffering, and maybe we'll come down to the where you think you're good, but the pain points is where we typically end up conversations with. But and in my level, I don't talk about technology. I don't talk about whether it's IBP or our SAP solutions. It's more of what capability do you want to achieve.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Praful. Great to talk with you. Oh, sorry. Please go ahead, Lee.
Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Praful. Pete Persona with Arthrex, and thanks so much for sharing some of your time and your expert perspective with us today. Very much appreciate that.
Welcome.
I have one comment and then maybe one question for you to expand on. As for my comment, No, really, as for Arthrex, we think about our digital supply chain as more or less an evolving ecosystem. That's kind of how we look at it. And so much of what you presented today, we're in various stages of what Tom Foster referred to as maturity. So some things more, some things less. But the one topic you briefly touched on, and I thought maybe we could revisit and have you expand on, one topic that is really emerging at Arthrex as a point of emphasis is sustainability. Not only sustainability within supply chains, sustainability in terms of transportation and logistics ecosystem, and how firms are measuring and trying to say, where are they? What does that look like? But even sustainability about packaging and products. We're hearing from a lot of our surgeon partner and hospital partners that, less is more, love your products, hate your packaging. What are you doing about it? And so I guess my question, so that's a comment. So my question for you is really from your expert perspective, what have you seen? What are solutions perhaps that SAP is promoting, or what have you seen more broadly that are, better in class tools for supply chain leaders, supply chain organizations to have some way to broadly measure and then tell the story of their journey? We even have some sales folks come to us now and again saying, look, our prospective customers are expecting more for us. What can we share with them? Our journey, what can we share with them about our measures? So a good bit there, but I was wondering if you could either expand on what maybe SAP can offer, or what you've seen as better in class tools for supply chain leaders.
So we're in the middle. We're in the midst of a Sapphire, as you're aware, Pete. And when our CEO had the keynote last week, he talked a lot about sustainability, and we've partnered with the World Economic Forum and the UN Sustainability Board, and it's called an SDG Dashboard. So I'm not as familiar with it, but what they've gotten is best-in-class best practices on the KPIs of what you should be, and obviously carbon emissions and stuff.
Yes.
So again, similar to what I mentioned to Tom, to me is the dashboard is, where are you? You could be in the worst position, but at least, I know where I need to go, or what parts do I need to, is it waste? Is it emissions? Is it, what other parts of sustainability? Even in sustainability, you talk about packaging. It could be in the material, it could be in the packaging, it could be in your transportation, right? And so there is the dashboard. The measuring part of it is one solution or to have. And then once you know that, is some of this, I believe, is built into the solution itself. So in terms of transportation management is the one that comes to mind, is real-time traffic routing, load optimization for trucks, mode optimization for even selecting what those modes are, the ability to, like I know with Uber Freight, for example, the partnership is to be able to tender freight within 30 seconds, because, one is finding the truck that's closest to you is a form of carbon emissions. And so, some of that is built. Asset intelligence is, where you talk about predictive maintenance. So sustainability to me comes in so many different various forms of we have I don't know if it's a solution, but I know it's a capability we've offered on intelligence shop floor. It could be lighting, right? It's and then we have partners. I forget one of the companies. They're based in Georgia. They've got these smart lighting things for your factories. So those all add, but the goal is, how bad am I? What's my from an electric consumption, from a shutdown? Every time I shut down, I equate that to some form of waste, changeovers. So can I measure that? And that's where the sustainability development dashboard. Apologize, my dog in the house. But
enthusiastic.
Yeah, so I guess short answer is, there is a sustainability dashboard that is pre-built. Obviously, it gets its data. A lot of its data from the ERP is a big part of it. Supply chain, if it's focused on, and I do have something I can talk to. I think Jay Baker is who you work with. Yeah,
Jay is a colleague.
let Jay know, but
Yeah, it's just an interest area of ours. So I appreciate your words on that. And yeah, it's you mentioned about, I like how you said, how bad are you? Well, I think we have a consciousness. That's the expression I tell our CEO. We have a sustainability consciousness, and we're trying to move up that ladder to be, more responsible and to have really some measures, really create a little bit of a North Star. Because Praful, it was interesting when you said there's so many things you can pursue. And so we're trying to winnow it down to, well, what are the top 3 or 4 to just go pursue that, make improvements, and then socialize and market some of the progress points we made, even to our marketeers, so they can go to their customers and say, we've decided these things are important for our firm. Here's where we are on our journey, and here's the progress that we're making. I think that's how foundational our journey is, and that's where I think when you're at the start of a journey, you look to what others have done. You look to see what others have done well, and then you borrow from that, or you say, well, what can I adapt?
Well, and the other key thing is for your folks on the shop floor to know what they need to do to impact sustainability. So when that dashboard filters down to the person saying, what do I do that impacts down the road any kind of waste and things? So that's important.
I think that's great. It also builds culture. I will tell you that within our firm, again, I mentioned we have a consciousness, and so I didn't want to go long on this time or this topic, but the 20s and 30 somethings at our firm are looking to leadership going, you got to do more. What are we? Where are we? And I feel an obligation to, so yes, there's a customer pull side of that, but there's also an intra-Arthrex, sort of appetite. And I think we're hearing it, and then some are looking, going, great. Well, what are you doing about it, Pete?
Yeah.
Working on it.
No, and even again, this is a very passionate subject of mine. I just came up one where Chip Bergh, who's the CEO of Levi's, took a company stance on political and social equality.
I saw. And he said, you have to stand for something or you stand for nothing.
That's right.
Brilliant. And I feel like there's a tide turn there, so the 20s and 30s is something saying, where do we stand? What are we doing? Where are we? And so, more is expected, and we're a little, we're growing our consciousness. Thank you, Praful, for your time, sir.
Absolutely.
All right. Is there any other questions for Praful? If not,
I don't know if we have time, Raj.
Pardon me?
Do we have time for another question?
Okay. Praful, Lee wants to answer a question. Go
Absolutely. I like I said, my next one
Very
is
good. It's very quick. Thank you so much for participating in having this webinar with us. It's very useful. And Pete, it was nice to hear from you, from your young management team. That I also see that from my students. They're also very young. So I recently, you might be familiar, Praful, with the term resilience of supply chain, ability to resist and recover, right, from disruptions. And initially was research after the Twin Towers were attacked in 9/11, Professor Sheffield from the MIT. And then we had in 2008, and now with the COVID, it's a lot of research into that aspect. I recently been working with Professor FGCU and other professors from other countries, specifically on the food supply chain resilience. And I want to pick your brains here, because food supply chain resilience or food supply chain is different than traditional products like Levi's or iPad, because if my Levi jeans or my iPad is delayed a day or two, okay, I'm not gonna die. And the product's not gonna spoil, right? But food is very different. And one of the aspects is security of the food supply chain, because it has enormous social, economic, and political implications as well. So technology has a great impact on that. We know that, and that's what research points to. It's one of the solutions. In terms of digital supply chain for perishable products, what would you say would be the greatest value? Because this came into light because of COVID. Now we all experience the food imbalances, and this not just food, but toilet papers and masks and things like that. But specifically for food, right? A lot of spoilage in the field. If you don't pick at the right time, they spoil. If you don't transport at the right time, if you don't store at the right place with the right capacity, refrigerated equipment and storage. So how is the technology could help the most the food perishable supply chain? What do you think? Where do you see that digital supply chain playing the most important support for that resilience?
So I think there's I think of multiple. So the biggest one, which is actually why SAP has come out with one of the latest solutions they've come out with, is food replenishment for fresh, because that is a specific from a replenishment. It's based on, and then you tie that with if it's cold chain, if it's frozen, or then you have to. There's sensors, right, in terms of what is the expected. Was the door open? Was the door closed? What's the level? What's the fluctuation at the store itself? And then driving replenishments based on both current consumption and predictive consumption, and having I know in not in grocery, but vertical farming has become big. And so one of my buddies joined a company called InFarm, and their goal is your food shouldn't travel further than you have to come to pick up the food, right? So growing things vertically. They've now partnered with, I think, Kroger in Seattle. So the replenishment of fresh is different than replenishment of canned products, right? So, and I don't know a lot of detail around what are the capabilities of that, but there's a specific solution on that. Weather-based forecasting and replenishment has become huge in terms of availability. Then you think of transportation to and from, and the cold chain monitoring has always been there. It's not like, post-COVID, we decided, we're going to do cold chain and monitor the. So I think, and then the last thing is in terms of sourcing is, and that's what I was talking about, supplier onboarding, which is how quickly can you bring on a supplier? Because you don't want to have 50 suppliers for a product for just in case, but how do you do good supplier management to where you've got your key and the other non-key suppliers, but if you need additional suppliers to fill, the example of toilet paper, there was an interview with the CEO of Walmart, and the NRF interviewed Doug McMillan, asked him the same question. He said, there are some things that was hard to predict, right? There are some things, the resilient part that you mentioned is very true, is how quickly you learned it once, how quickly can you not make it happen again? And so they started looking at not just the POS data, but the different points of the supply chain where the data comes in is, okay, so we're going through this. Now I know that people are starting to stay home. Parents are staying home with kids. So maybe puzzles and Scrabbles is going to take off, right? People are staying, they're not going to the barber, so hair cutting product. The ability to use data to predict some of this is, and especially in the case of fresh, the goal for pre-made, ready-to-go orders or pre-made. So we did a proof of concept study with Costco's bakery, and we used AI and I don't think it was sensor data, but there's I'd be glad to share that with Dr. Srivastava. He can share that. It's a well-known study we did around reducing waste of fresh for bakery, specifically for bakery, and using predictive consumption to not overproduce. And this is bakery not sitting somewhere, but you know how you go to a Costco and it's in the bakery section. So we did a waste reduction using smart technology for, but replenishment I know is a big one which was the latest one to come out for SAP, because there's a focus, as you suggested, on fresh, both from a sourcing, but also from a replenishment and reducing spoilage.
Yeah, I heard one of the I was reading that technology allows for a lot of visibility on the supply chain.
Yeah,
one of the
absolutely.
could be the more visibility you have, you reduce that risk of spoilage and waste in the food chain.
And the same thing with theft too. I mean, it won't happen. Theft is not an issue with groceries, but when you get into high-end fashion wear,
Yeah.
that's, having sensors to know where your product is in the fitting room versus in the back room versus, it's being taken out on the side. And there's been use cases where it's helped.
Yeah,
I'll disagree on that there's no theft in grocery, but other.
Oh yeah, you kidding?
It's a huge problem.
Bob, a tuna in Japan can sell for $1 million.
Yeah.
You
yeah. I mean, frozen pizza is a high theft item. So
one time toilet paper was very expensive.
Yeah, exactly. I switched my lately. I just want to. I switched my background from the railroad over to my cold storage warehouse behind me. On one side is frozen turkeys. On the other side is concentrate juice. Okay. Just to broadly answer your direct, your question from the get-go, what can be done to mitigate, interruptions in the food supply chain? It's the other half of my life of what we do, both at the restaurant level and the warehouse level, and the 3PL level, which is one, you have to refrigerate it as quickly as possible at the source. That is the key to preserving the food supply chain. And it doesn't matter what it is, the faster you can refrigerate it. Studies have shown again and again around the world, especially in developing countries, where waste levels are 60% and higher of everything that comes out of the fields. And so if you can get it refrigerated quickly at the field level, you're going to save everything right off the bat. Up to 60% of your food waste comes right from the field. Around the world. In the US, it's in North America and Europe, it's a lot less than that, but the rest of the world. And then in terms of the technology and the visibility of things, it's being able to, if you could predict that COVID was going to hit and the world was going to turn from a food service world to a retail world overnight. No one was ready for that. No one was ready for the packaging, of how do you get it from, I've got to get it ready for Cisco and US Food Service and Cheney Brothers. And now I have to get it ready for Publix and Kroger at all, and Amazon delivering it. That was the biggest macro shift that happened, and what caused a lot of the interruptions. Plus you have plant shutdowns and things like that. So, those are but at the raw level, it gets down to temperature control. There's absolutely zero question that temperature control will win that fight every day of the week, regardless of what the product is. But the technology to support all that, as Praful had said, the technology's been there for ages to monitor everything. But now it's getting into how do we prevent the disruptions from happening, and how do we be able to adapt and make those shifts, especially when they're instantaneous and they're that transcendent across the world of food service to retail.
The other thing I'd add, Bob, is and that's where I talk about the network, right? So I work with a food distributor that serviced all the Starbucks stores, and they would do the nightly replenishment. And this was in the mid 2000s or early to late mid 2000s. Is if I know what I know now, and if I had a network economy to where I had access to that temperature monitoring and this thing, I could have done more. I could have done a better job for Starbucks with predictive replenishment, so that I know when things are so not Starbucks employees coming in the morning and saying, "Oops, this is going to be wasted in an hour." But could my suppliers know? So if they're replenishing and opening up and restocking, how do I make them smarter to take stuff out that's going to, go to waste within an hour of operation and replenish with products with fresh replenishment? And that's where even in homes, the refrigerators, I know we had showcased this at NRF, is with grocers, is how do you use Alexa to check temperature and then reorder, milk in the fridge and stuff like that. So the more that you can open your network to your partners, whether it's your 3PL providers or your distributors, is at the end of the day going to make less waste at the grocery store. All
right. I think I I'm going to step back in and believe we have run way past Praful's time.
I know.
And so I am going to leave it with my usual, as an academic, I would be remiss if I didn't put in 2 words. First of all, I want to thank Praful for his time. Secondly, as an academic, I do want to say the whole idea of digital supply chain is predicated on 2 things. One is the ability to get real-time data. Correct, Praful?
Absolutely.
And the second is the ability to truthfully share information across the links in the supply chain.
The only thing, and not to add over what you just said, but the real-time data is of your supplier, of your operation data, but that's where our focus has gone, is what does the experience sentiments look like, and to use that experience sentiment to change the products that you introduce in your product development, to use experience information to improve your transportation, warehousing, planning, using experience and operational to drive in this.
But of course, that also is in real time. You're finding out what consumers are experiencing and what they're saying.
Absolutely.
And of course, then the other one is all the links in your supply chain, your network partners, they have to be on board and also share the information 100% with you.
Not via email.
Not via email, no. In real time.
Right.
That's the challenge.
Absolutely.
But I want to thank Praful for the wonderful afternoon, and I look forward to seeing all of you next month. And we'll send out information about next month shortly. Thank you, Praful.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Praful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Thanks, Pete.
Next month.
Cheers.